Hello and welcome back to this second episode of Gaming with GreyHunter for TGIG, where, as I explained in the last bit of the last episode, we'd be going through the Council and what they do. So let's begin with the Chancellor. The Chancellor is your guy who's the, he's the diplomat, pretty much. He's essentially your go-to guy for a lot of stuff. He's sort of your second in command, and he's usually the guy who ends up being your regent should you need one. So, our Chancellor is a fellow called Flan MacDomnall, and he's got a score of 15. 15's pretty good for a beginner. So, let's go through what the Chancellor does. He has 3 separate jobs. Every council member has 3 separate jobs, but his ones are to improve diplomatic relations, which is useful if there's a particularly threatening person hanging out on your border. So if we were playing, say, Wales, it would be worth giving our Chancellor the mission improve diplomatic relations with the King of England, say. Because if you did that, he might be less inclined to go to war with you for land that he had a claim on, or somebody else who he was in charge of had a claim on. The second one is fabricating claims, and as I mentioned in the last episode, you need reasons to go to war in this game. And the way that you'll frequently get those reasons is through a Chancellor fabricating claims. So they've got a chance to fabricate a claim on a title, and usually you'll get one on a county. You can't get them on baronies, you can't get them on cities or bishoprics. The only places you can get them on are counties or duchies, if your Chancellor happens to be exceptionally good. So a lot of the time when you go to war, you'll be going to war for a fabricated claim that your Chancellor has managed to make up, really. So, we need to expand our territory. How about we send old Chancellor Flan MacDomnall off to fabricate a claim in Ossory. That probably won't come to fruition for a fair while, but in this series we'll basically go through setup and then we'll play through a few years, so we might have something happen there. The third and final job is to sow dissent, and essentially that's a good way to mess up the opposition, because in war you require, levies. You require men to do the fighting, and one of the things that determines how many men you get to do the fighting is how well your vassals like you. So if they don't like you at all, you won't get all that many men, which can be kind of bad for you if you happen to be facing off against a larger enemy, like say the Mongols, because they rock up and they are powerful. So that's what the Chancellor does. You've also got this funky little button here that forbids them from leading armies, so if they happen to be good at fighting, they won't get called back from whatever it was they were doing in, other people's land. Or in your own land sometimes, true. You sometimes will have to improve diplomatic relations with vassals, just to secure their support for a war. But if you click this button, it means that he won't go to war when you go to war. So he'll hang out and do his job still. The Marshal is number 2 on the list, and he's very, very good because he, essentially, is your war leader. Now you might get lucky and have a Marshal skill that's really high yourself, but your Marshal, your Marshal will command the army, essentially. So what does he do? Well, he can suppress revolts in your own land, which can be useful if you've managed to annoy the locals, especially useful if you happen to manage to get one of these Arab realms. So say you managed to crusade successfully for Jerusalem, if you had your Marshal go and suppress revolts in the places that had high revolt risk, you'd be much more likely to have a stable realm, and you'd have more time to sort of secure your foothold in the Middle East. But that's a useful little thing that he can do. He can suppress revolts, and that generally means that you won't have to face peasant armies rising up and trying to claim your land, which they will do if you annoy them sufficiently. The other things that he can do is he can train troops, and this increases how many levies you have. That's just your personal levies though, it's not levies of vassals and such, so it's only worth using in your own actually held land. So if we sent him to train troops, we'd train troops in Thormond, not Ormond, because Thormond is our personal land. So he can be quite good at doing that. He also manages occasionally to get really quick reinforcement rate. So he's got a plus 75% chance base, but if that event triggers for levy reinforcements, he'll get even more, so you'll probably be able to get your troops reinforced even faster. The Marshal is kind of useful, but for the most part you'll want him actually leading armies. He's more of a warrior than anything else, and occasionally, if you're lucky, you'll get one that has not only a brilliant strategist, obviously he doesn't, but they'll have a couple of traits down here for leading troops, like unyielding or innovative thinker, etc., which will help them when they lead your army to war. The third and final job he's got is researching military tech, and that can be useful. It can be useful when you're low on technology, which we'll also go to in this episode probably. So technology generally determines how many men you can raise, how, in your retinue, or how quickly you can besiege a county, etc. It's sort of like war tech, as the name suggests. So occasionally he will have accidents, or he'll reveal a military secret and you'll be able to get more research quicker, or he might die from a military drill accident. So it's a useful thing at first to send him to train troops in your own land when you're first beginning the game, because the more troops you have, the more likely it is you'll win any border wars you get into. So we'll send him over to Thormond and he'll try to raise some more troops. Now the third fella here, he's the steward. He's very important because he's the guy who helps you manage more land. So as you can see here, we've got a domain size of 6. And we've got our base, we've got a king rank, we've got a stewardship bonus, which comes from our state stewardship. Now, state stewardship is us plus half of our wife plus our councillor. So our councillor is giving us plus 11 on the 22 that we've already got, and when we get married, we'll get extra. So then this will go up again. The steward is important also because what he does is he can go collect taxes, so he increases how much money you already get from your personal lands, but he has the chance to collect a tithe. Of course, there's also the chance that the peasants will get annoyed at him trying to do that, and they'll kill him, or they'll wound him, etc. You can also send him to oversee construction, which basically means that you get everything built faster, which can be useful. It's very useful when you get to about the 1250s, because buildings start taking about 4 years to be built at the really, really high tech levels. That might have changed a little bit because of the way they've changed technology around, but it's a safe general rule that a build time modifier that lowers how long it'll take is always a good thing. Of course, there is obviously the case where the construction will be sabotaged. That's not a good thing at all. And his third and final job is to research economy tech. Nothing special, it's pretty much exactly the same as researching military tech except for the economy chain. But what you want to do at first is you want to send him to collect taxes. You'll need this money because you'll need to build up your realm, and if you go on wars of conquest, you'll need to, well, pay for it. Also, if the Chancellor manages to fabricate a claim, you'll need to pay for the claim. So you pay a little bit of gold to have the documents fabricated, that sort of thing. All very interesting. The next guy we've got on our list is our Spy Master, and he's important because essentially what he does is he makes sure that people don't try to kill you. So very important, but you have to keep on his good side because if he doesn't like you very much, it's entirely possible that he'll be one of the people trying to kill you. And he gets a massive bonus to that. So be wary. So our Spy Master is, well, he does intrigue. He makes sure everything gets done. So as it says there, he's the unofficial position on the council that is responsible for all matters of intrigue and skullduggery. So what can he do? He can scheme, which is a good idea if you have an unstable realm, because you can send him to scheme and uncover plots, which is very useful because say you were an unliked ruler, if you had him scheme in your own home county, it's entirely possible that he might discover a plot to kill you. And as we've already stated, plots to kill you are very, very bad, because if you die, you might end up in a regency, or if you're unlucky, you might end up with no land at all, because you haven't had a child yet. So there's always the chance of him uncovering a plot. However, the other function is to stop people from joining factions. So factions are this tab here, And occasionally you'll get people forming factions for a different set of rules for inheritance, or they'll want independence, or they'll want to lower your crown authority, that sort of thing, which we'll get into when we go over to crown laws, and, well, laws in general. So he can find out about that, and he can also discourage people from joining the faction. If you happen to be doing a faction of your own, say you're subservient to a king, he can also encourage people to join your faction. So say you were trying to win yourself independence, and you managed to get a powerful vassal of the king on side with you, you'd have that much better of a chance. So the Spy Master's good for stuff like that. He can also build spy networks in foreign lands, and that's very good because it increases your base assassination chance. So assassination is done through the diplomacy menu, and we can't do it with our fella, so we'll do it with El Ragnvald, or whatever his name is. You can attempt to assassinate him. Provided you have enough money, you can attempt this, so you basically pay a sellsword or a cutthroat to go after him. It's not fantastic, it's much better to plot against somebody because you can get more people on your side and it's a lot less likely to get uncovered, but you can try to assassinate people directly. If you do that, having the Spy Master building spy networks there is very, very good, because if he manages to build one, he can get a higher chance of success and a lowered chance of discovery. Of course, he can still fail at that and you'll still be discovered, so it's by no means a way of guaranteeing success. He can also find out rumors about people, so he can discover basically that people are sort of stealing from you, or he could discover that they are plotting against you. It's a little bit like the scheming, but it's in foreign lands. So it's useful, but it's got limited uses unless you plan to kill people through assassination on a regular basis, which isn't a good idea because it costs a ton of money. His third and final job is again a technology-based one, where you send him to spy somewhere, and he can occasionally steal their technology. So a good place I've found to steal technology from is here. I'm not sure how you say it, Sviguig maybe, but it's got really high technology for a beginning province. It's got 8 military advances, 12 economy, and 14 culture. Another good place that I've been told about is Constantinople, because Constantinople has all this, but the Constantinople province has the problem of being part of the Byzantine Empire, so you want to be careful about plotting over there or stealing tech from them. But for the sake of this Let's Learn to Play, we'll chuck him in there. So he's trying to steal technology from Constantinople. And now we come to the last of our people on the council. Now, Court Chaplain, he's basically your priest. That's pretty much all he does. He's got 3 abilities that are kind of useful, but they're useful in different situations. So his first one is Proselytize. Proselytizing is good if you're playing the 867 start, or for when the Mongols turn up, because it gives you a chance of converting whoever it is you send him to proselytize to your religion, which is very handy for people like pagans who get special war reasons on people not of their faith, especially for the Mongols, because the Mongols have no attrition, massive stack armies, so it's very useful for them. But it's very situational, so only use it if there's not really a way to take these pagans on in the field, because it's very unlikely, and it's occasionally possible that your fellow will be imprisoned and even sacrificed to pagan gods, because they think, oh yeah, it's cool, kill him, off with his head. Well, not so much off with his head, more out with his entrails, but you get the idea. And occasionally he will be useful for if one of your counties changes to a Catholic heresy, so Fraticelli, Cathar, or Lollard, for example. So you can send him to convert the place back. It's also useful for if you conquer a place like, again, Jerusalem. If you conquer it through crusade, these people will not be of your religion, they'll be of some Muslim religion, so proselytizing there is safer because it's your own land, so you won't have him be imprisoned and executed. And it's also useful because if you convert them, they'll like you more than they otherwise did. And it's very, very important for places like the Middle East, where you're essentially surrounded by enemies. So that's a useful one. His other ability is to research cultural tech, which is kind of good, but you can generally get by without it. researching cultural tech is exactly the same as researching economy and military, except he has the chance to become a heathen every once in a while, which is kind of worrisome, but it can be useful. But the one that I find is the most useful is improving religious relations, especially if you manage to improve religious relations with the Pope, because if the Pope likes you more, it's occasionally a very good thing, because he will give you gifts. He'll give you gifts for upholding the Crusader cause, which is kind of nice. It's very useful. And occasionally, you'll be able to split people from their own religious head. So if you want to, say, get someone excommunicated because they hold a prince-bishopric, which is a duchy held by a bishop, if you can decrease religious relations between him and the Pope, you might be able to bring them down to a level where you can get him excommunicated and you can attack his lands, which is always nice. But the most use you'll get from it in the early game is by improving religious relations with your own court chaplain. Because the thing about court chaplains, and bishops in general, is that if you go to the religion tab, you'll see there's two numbers here. So that's his opinion of the Pope, and that's his opinion of you. If he likes you less than he likes the Pope, he'll pay his taxes to the Pope instead of you. Which is kind of annoying, because in the early game you need all the money you can get. So right now he likes us too, but he loves the Pope because the Pope has all these wonderful different things, as well as being the head of his religion. So it can be worrisome to have somebody who doesn't like you as opposed to liking the Pope, because again, you need this guy on your side, because it's entirely possible that they might excommunicate you. So you need him to like you, so you can get the Pope to like you. It's a little bit circular, but that's the way Crusader Kings 2 works a lot of the time. So let's move on to laws next, seeing as it's the next one across. And in here you'll get different types of laws. So because we're only a duchy, we don't have crown laws, and we don't have a king, so we don't have any of the kingdom laws. If we had a kingdom, we would, but at the moment we do not. So what laws can we change? Well, we can change the levy size. So we've got feudal levies, city levies, and church levies. All of those are basically just how many men they give you during times of war. So you can get a fixed amount by putting up how many levies they owe you. Feudal levies are generally the best because they provide a lot of heavy infantry, a lot of cavalry, and generally they'll provide a fair few pikemen. Pikemen are very important, especially if you're facing someone who's very cavalry heavy like the Mongols. It's basically the same as any other strategy game. City levies, they're quite good because they come in large numbers, but they generally are made up of archers and light infantry, which are fairly useful. And if you've got a large army, you can generally win by force of numbers, but it might be wise to not annoy the cities too much with high levies, and instead have high taxes. Same with the church, except the church provides a blend of the city versus the feudal vassals. They provide heavy infantry, pikemen, some archers, no heavy cav. Heavy cav is godly in this game. It's very, very important, so as many times as you can get heavy cav, get it. The other sort of laws we can change are taxation, obviously, and if you're going to go with maximum feudal levies, it's generally an idea to try and keep taxation for the feudal vassals to small. Small provides you with enough money that you'll be able to keep a profit, generally, but a lot of your taxes will come from the cities and the church. But again, the cities won't like you as much if you tax them a lot, and the church relies on them liking you more than they like the Pope. But if you tax them a lot, then they won't like you as much as they like the Pope, so it's a little bit undermining. But generally it's a good idea to have lots of city taxes, lots of feudal levies, and a medium for the church. Usually pick between these instead of having them both on medium, because, again, the church, if they don't like you, they won't pay you. But church levies is very, very good. So I generally lean towards church levies, because they can't deny you those on the basis of how much they like you. Well, they can, but they don't deny you them entirely. It's a little complicated, but we'll get to that when we go to war. So that's fairly easy. The other thing that you've got here is succession law. Succession and gender law. So agnatic means only males can inherit. Agnatic cognatic means only males can inherit. Well, it doesn't mean only males can inherit. It means men and women can both inherit. But women can only inherit after all eligible men have been given land in Gavelkind. Absolute cognatic is a special one. It's only available to people who are Basque. So for people who are Basque, that would be northern Spain, so Vizcaya, Navarra, this sort of place. And that means that men and women inherit on equal terms. So whoever's firstborn, if it's primogenitor, means that if it's a woman, she'll inherit over the man. So there you go. Women inherit on the same grounds men do. Only males can inherit. And we can't really see... Ah, there we go. Women can inherit, but only if there are no eligible males. So that's gender laws. I generally like to go for agnatic cognatic, because you get a malus for having a woman ruler, but it's better to have agnatic cognatic, because if you only have agnatic and you have no sons, you've got a slight problem, because you won't be able to pass on your lands. Absolute cognatic, I've never really had a use for it. I mean, it could be useful if you were ruling a large place and you made it an empire law, but I don't know. I don't see how it could be particularly fantastic unless you were aiming to play as a mainly female line. It could still be useful though. Anyway, succession laws. There are some that are very specific. So Tanistry is one that's only available to Irish people, as far as I know. It might be available to Scots as well, but it's a special succession law in which the ruler and all vassals below can nominate an heir. So it's a sort of special version of elective monarchy. So everybody who's a vassal, including yourself, can nominate an heir from the eligible pool of your dynasty. So it's more useful than elective monarchy in the way that it makes sure that somebody of your dynasty will inherit, but everybody gets a vote. Whereas in elective monarchy, only people one step below you get a vote. So basically dukes. If you rule an empire, the kings who are subservient to you will also get a vote. And if you hold too many elector titles in an elective monarchy, they get annoyed with you. So vassals will be very, very pissed, basically. Whereas in Tanistry, that doesn't matter so much because everyone gets a vote. So those are the two elective forms. Seniority can be useful, but it's only useful if you need to reunite all your land. So say you're the King of Ireland, but then you've also got someone who's the King of Scotland, and then a third person who's the King of England. If the person who rules Scotland is older than the person who rules Ireland, Ireland will pass to the person who rules Scotland, because they are older. I don't know why I included England in that, there's no reason to have a third. Anyway, if they are older than the person who rules, who stood to inherit, so say you were in primogenitor, and then you switched to seniority, the oldest person in the dynasty will inherit everything, so Scotland and Ireland would be united under that particular set of circumstances. But I generally don't find that it's all that useful because you'll always be old. So if you need realm stability, you'll always be old, you'll always be dying, and you'll always be inheriting a short reign malus, which is really, really bad, in my opinion. The other two are primogenitor and ultimogenitor. And primogenitor means your firstborn child inherits everything. Ultimogenitor means your lastborn child inherits everything. But again, if you've got agnatic cognatic, lastborn male, or firstborn male before female, which is kind of useful. And Gavelkind is one where it splits your realm, so your titles get divided evenly between your child, or between your children. So the oldest gets your primary title, the second will get your second primary title. So if you had two dukedoms, say, we had the Dukedom of Munster and the Dukedom of Meath, the first son would get the Dukedom of Munster, the second one would get the Dukedom of Meath. So it's useful if you don't plan to be anything more than a small kingdom. And it does give you a +1 for having Gavelkind succession. So it's very useful, but you cannot destroy titles underneath Gavelkind. So it's a little bit... it's useful, but it's got its limitations. And for that reason I prefer to go Primogenitor, because that one's nice, clear cut. Your oldest is always the heir, your oldest inherits everything. You can give out extra titles if you want to, but you're under no obligation to do so, and it's generally just more stable, in my opinion. Bear in mind, of course, that this all is my opinion, so I could be very well wrong when you look at the mathematics of it. So technology. Technology is a fairly easy thing to go through because it's relatively irrelevant, really. You generate research points, so if any of you have played Victoria 2, you'll understand how this works. You generate research points, and once you've got enough of them, you can invest in a rank up of whatever it is that you currently have. So we get plus 0.84 for our learning, plus our martial skill, and then tech points per attribute is 0.04. You can also build technology buildings that increase how much you get, so places like universities and monastic schools, but they're not as easy to build anymore because they've changed how infrastructure works as well. So that's this lot. So military advances is how well you fight. So light infantry, better arms and armor, heavy infantry, same thing, cavalry, same thing, siege equipment, bigger and better siege engines. It generally just means you siege things faster, you resist sieges better. Simple. Shipbuilding, you get bigger fleets, easy. Simple stuff. Military organization is the really important one, in my opinion, because it increases the morale of your army, it increases how many men you can have before attrition sets in, and most important, it increases how many retinue men you can have. And the retinue is very important because it's essentially your standing army. So it's an army that is loyal to you. You will need one, because occasionally you'll have civil wars where you can only call on your own troops. And if you have a retinue, that's an extra pool of troops you can call on that are very, very useful. So military organization for me is the way to go. Upgrade that out the arse. Everything else is useful, but this one is most important. Siege equipment is a good second, because the rest of these can be offset by numbers. Siege equipment, the faster you can siege things, the better. The longer you can resist, the better. So that's what I think for military advances. Economy is a little bit more tricky, because everything here is important, but the ones that I think are most important are castle infrastructure and improved keeps, because they let you upgrade your castles, where the majority of your troops are coming from, and you can see where this is going when it links back to military advances. So castle infrastructure lets you build better castle infrastructure, like stables, barracks, castle towns, which earn you money, and your specialized training ground, so in this case our gallowglasses. Improved keeps allows you to build better fortifications. Keeps are the most important ones, as in the actual keep building, because they increase how many troops you can field, and again, how long you resist. Town infrastructure and church infrastructure aren't as important, from what I can tell, because they'll go up by themselves organically, and by the time they become relevant, you're already swimming in money. Church infrastructure is next to useless. Town infrastructure makes sense when you want to build things like universities. Trade practices just means you get a bit more money from towns, and if you're a republic, it's kind of important because it leads to trade post limits, so it increases how many you can have, which is kind of good. And construction is useful for speeding up things, but again, you can just use your steward. You can put your steward in there and he'll do it all. He'll increase how quickly you build, and he might even pop you a construction bonus just by, being there. It's that simple. Now, culture. Culture is the important one. And the most important one, I think, in my mind, is legalism. Because legalism reduces how long your short reign years are and increases how much land you can personally hold. Short reign is massive, because if you have short reign of malice of 10 years, that's 10 years in which people will just hate you for being a young ruler. Even if you're old, even if you've been ruling whatever it was you had before, for 30 years, once you become the king or whatnot, all that goes away. You are immediately seen again as a new ruler. So it's very, very important in my eyes. It also increases how much land you can hold, as I already said, which is very important, especially if you're a duke. Once you get to a king and emperor size, it's kind of less important because you'll get bonuses for being a king or an emperor, but it's kind of useful. Tolerance is helpful for reducing culture and religion penalties, but you can generally do that by giving out money, giving out gifts. Majesty is good, however, because it increases how much piety and prestige you get, so how famous you are and how holy you are, basically, which can be very important if you want to form more titles, because titles cost piety, and prestige, that helps because it's how famous you are. People like you more if you're more famous. That makes sense. Religious customs improves how much church vassals like you, so it's useful if you need to bump up their liking of you to get their taxes. Kind of useful. Popular customs does the same thing for mayors and lord mayors and doges, that sort of thing. Kind of useful, but the most useful one out of the customs thing that I think is the nobles, because the more nobles like you, the more troops they give you, and as we already discussed, they give you the best troops. The best troops are very important troops. Having lots of them is even better. But again, this is all just my opinion, so I could be completely wrong on some things when you do the math of it. It might be more efficient to go for these things before you go for legalism, but I don't know that. So anyway, we've been going for about half an hour, so I think I'll call this episode to a close, and then the next one will probably go through military, intrigue, and factions and religion, and then we'll get around to actually beginning a game properly. So until then, this is GreyHunter signing out, and I'll see you in the next episode of Gaming with GreyHunter. Toodaloo!